Hey, please excuse the helicopter in the background, but it's kind of appropriate because what I want to talk to you about today is music and yoga, or specifically asana. So I think a lot of people think that traditionalists are averse to that because of some kind of quest for purity or just plain tradition. And to explain why really we avoid that kind of thing, I need to talk to you about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, darshan and distraction. And I'll start with darshan and distraction, hence the helicopter's appropriate. What I mean by darshan in this instance, I'm just going to translate it as connection. And the idea is that actually there's only one thing that you really connect to, which is this sublime or divine aspect of existence. How's the sun doing? So obviously what we set, this principle of duality of darshan and distraction, is that you are either getting darshan or you're being distracted from darshan, because our natural state is one of connection. So expanding upon that, we also have this idea of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So for example, if you're doing something with I'm going to say ulterior, but that's got a negative connotation, some kind of ulterior motive in mind. So that might be that you're doing something for money, or you're doing something for a promotion, or you're doing something to attract someone, then that might be what we call an extrinsic motivation. And if you're doing something for the joy of the thing itself, then that would be an intrinsic motivation. And so I'm just going to use an example there, and that is the example of playing the piano. And, you know, we might play the piano for the sheer enjoyment. We might practice the piano for the sheer enjoyment of practicing itself. Or we might do it because we want to put on a concert and we might want to impress people, or get paid for it, or all kinds of things, or feel significant. So it doesn't take an enormous intellectual leap to realise that that it's possible, and I think you eventually have to think of intrinsic motivation as actually being motivated by this idea of darshan and that connection. Just going to collect some mushrooms here. That darshan is ultimately the underlying motivation for everything that we do for its own sake. That's a whole subject in itself, but what I want to come back to is the idea of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and how all of this then binds up. Because if you're doing yoga for extrinsic motivations, if you want a nice butt in its most pejorative way of looking at it, but there are all sorts of really good reasons. You might want to solve some kind of physical or mental blockage that you have. You might want to there's a whole host of reasons that you might do it. Actually, that sums it up, because even if you're just practicing it for a state of calmness, then that would count as an extrinsic motivation towards a blockage of some kind. So if you're being specific about it and you're moving towards something like that, then obviously you're not looking for a state of darshan. And it might be that, just like using music to study, using music in order to facilitate you being in a place where you can practice without your mind running away and the practice becoming non-practice, then more power to you. You know, if those are the objectives that you want from yoga, then that's great. If ultimately you're practicing yoga to go through this process of finding a deeper connection with your physical self and your mental self, and the relationship between those, and ultimately a deeper connection with your ultimate self, then putting on music while you're practicing is pulling away from being in that moment and finding that darshan, that connection with the ultimate and divine reality that underlies everything. I want to be really clear that I know that this state can also be found through music, but the point is that in order to find darshan, you have to become single-pointed and you have to become focused in order to let go of focus and find sadhana, find samadhi, ultimate connection with everything. My name's Shankar. I help people make the most of modern life through old school yoga. Have a great day.